In today's video, we are going to build, test, and deploy a web app for absolutely free. And so in today's video, I'm going to be showing you everything that you need to know when it comes to building web apps with FlutterFlow. And that includes things like performance, security, and being able to deploy it anywhere that you want for absolutely free. Now, before we get started, as always, all the apps and all the resources that I cover on this channel can be viewed and or cloned right from our amazing Patreon community. And if you're still not a member, then you're greatly missing out, and you should definitely join and become a member via the first link in the description below the video. Now, the app that we're going to be building is going to be a survey app, and this is an app that you can present to your users, maybe to your clients, customers, or pretty much anybody that you want, and get them to take a survey. And of course, apart from that, we're also going to have an admin screen where admins can log in and see some of the surveys that other people filled out. Now, before we start building our app, the first thing that we need to do is we need to go ahead and create our backend. And for our backend, we're going to be using Supabase, which is an amazing backend that I use for all kinds of apps. And so this is going to be a great backend to use. And so I'm going to go ahead and sign into my Supabase account and create a new project. All right, so here I am inside of my Supabase dashboard, and I'm gonna go ahead and create a new project here. And I'm gonna go ahead and call it Survey App, and I'm gonna go ahead and create the password here. And so here's my newly deployed project. And the first thing that I wanna do is I wanna go ahead and create some tables for it. The first table is gonna be the questions table. Okay, and we're gonna add a couple of fields. This is going to be question text and a question type, so that we can support multiple question types there. And this is going to be text. This is going to be text as well. I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm also going to go and create a questions options so that we can display multiple options for a specific question. We're going to have the question ID, which is going to be the foreign key to the question, so that there's a link. And I'm going to go ahead and create an option text, which is going to represent a specific option, one of many options for that table. Next, we need to create a table that's going to be storing responses. Just going to call it responses. We're going to have the question ID, which is a foreign key. We're going to have the response text. That's going to be text. And the next thing that we need to do is we need to create a row level security policy. Okay, this RLS policy. And right now, I'm going to go ahead and create an open policy. But later on in the video, I'm going to be showing you how you can lock this down. And this is especially important when it comes to web apps. Okay. So right now, let's go ahead and create a very simple wide open policy. Just going to say all, and this is true. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and do that for the other tables and for this table. All right, there we go. So now we have the policies, which means that we'll be able to access it from anywhere, including our app, which is very important. All right, so we have our tables here. And the next thing that I like to do is I like to create some sample data. Okay. So I'm going to go on this questions over here, and I'm going to create maybe a question. So for instance, we can ask something like, how would you rate your experience with this app? Okay, and this is a question app. I'm going to do multiple because it's a multiple choice question. We're going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to get the question ID, and I'm going to go into options, and I'm going to create the options for this question. So this is one option. Option 1 is excellent. Option 2 is great. Option 3 is going to be so-so. And option 4 is going to be poor. Okay. And let's go ahead and create just a regular question. We're going to go ahead and say something like, would you recommend this app to others? And this is going to be just a regular text. Question type is text. And let's do one more question. Do you have any feature suggestions for this app? Okay, and this is also going to be text, just like a regular question. Okay, so now we have 3 questions that we're going to be displaying to our users. We have this table of responses, and for this table, what we have is the question ID and the response text. Now we also need to track who is giving these responses, right? So this is going to be either a logged in user, a session ID or something like that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and track it with a user ID. Okay, and so that way user can log in and they can leave these responses, and then we'll have an admin functionality so that an admin can log in and they can see the responses. Okay, so I'm going to do this user ID and I'm going to go ahead and link it to a foreign key. So I'm just going to do foreign key. This is going to be auth users, and I'm going to go ahead and create a couple of users. So I'm going to go into authentication. I'm going to add a user. I'm going to do james@james.com. Now this is important. Make sure you remember the password, because if you forget the password, it's going to be very tricky to, log in as this user. Okay. So I know my passwords. I just typically use something that has to do with their username or their domain so that it's easy to remember. I'm going to confirm and I'm going to create a new user. The next thing I'm going to do is I want to configure the roles so that we can know who the user is and we can give them the right permissions. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create a new table. Just going to call it roles, and this is going to be the name of the role, and this is going to be text. So it's going to be something like a user or an admin. Okay, very simple. And then I'm going to create another table that's going to store the mapping with the user and the role that they're in. So I'm just going to call it user roles. And here it's just going to be 2 foreign keys, right? Because it's a many-to-many relationship. So we're going to have the user here. So I'm going to go ahead and create a user ID as well as the role ID. Okay, so this is going to be linking to this one, and this one is going to be linking. Okay, create that linking, and that's a many-to-many relationship. Next, let's go ahead and define the roles there. Okay, so I want to do admin and then a user role and then just a user. And so that way admin has an ID of 1, user has an ID of 2, and we need that because we're going to be creating records here. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to click here, and I'm going to select James, assign them to admin role here, and then I'm gonna select this, select Rob, and Rob is gonna be user role. And we also need to add an RLS policy here. I'm just gonna do all for now. We're gonna lock it down a little bit later. And I also need to do an RLS policy for roles, right? Because we're gonna be joining and all that, so that is important. All right. So now we have all the tables and we have the RLS policies in there, and we also have some sample data, which is very, very useful. And so now what we want to do is we want to create an app in FlutterFlow and then link this to FlutterFlow so that we can start building our FlutterFlow app. So here I am inside of FlutterFlow, and as you can see, I have tons and tons of apps. I use FlutterFlow pretty much everything. And so depending on your experience with FlutterFlow, you may have as many apps as I have here. But in any case, what you want to do is you want to click here and you want to create a new app. I'm just going to call it survey app, create blank. You can enable it, but it's not necessary right now. You can do that later. Start building it. All right, so now we have our app. And before we start building, we want to connect this app to our Supabase backend. I'm going to press Command K or Control K, and I'm going to type Supabase. I'm going to go ahead and enable it. And now I need the API URL and the anon key. I'm going to go back here. Project settings, data API. Here's the URL. For the anon key, we're going to copy this. And it's important to realize here is that your API is secured behind an API gateway, which requires an API key for every request, right? So this is safe to use in the browser, right? Because we're building a web app. This key is going to be available to everybody, right? It's going to be in the browser, right? Because the way a web app works when you build it with FlutterFlow is that it works just like a JavaScript app. It runs in the browser. And so this key is going to be, it's going to be exposed to everybody, right? It's important to understand. And that is where RLS policies come in, okay? Which we'll need to kind of lock down a little bit later. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste this here. And when I do get schema, I see all my tables, okay? And I wouldn't have seen these if we did not open up our RLS policies by creating this kind of default all access RLS policy for each table. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to connect here, okay? So we have these 5 tables. Everything looks good. We can write, we can read them, at least for now. At least everybody can write and read them. And so the next thing that I want to work on is I want to work on the UI here. All right, so now we can start building our app right here. Now, before we can display the right questions, remember we have a couple of tables in there, right? So we have the questions table and then we have the multiple options as well. And so what that means is that we need a way to kind of join them together. Now, if you were building an app from scratch, you would probably do something called a join. But because we're building with FlutterFlow and FlutterFlow does not support joins, we need to create a view, and that is absolutely fine. In fact, that is a way that I prefer. I prefer creating views for all my physical views, the ones that the user sees. So every kind of UI view is going to have a view in the background, like a backing view that's going to come from Supabase. And so we're going to jump into Supabase here. We're going to go to our table editor, and what we can do is we can use something called Supabase AI to do that. So if you click over here, you can get it to create a view for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say create a view to display the question info and all the possible options. Let's go ahead and see this. So it's going to join the two tables so that we get all the options that we can display them automatically. And this is what it has, option text. And what's important here is that this part, the left join, ensures that even questions without options will be included in the results. Okay, let's go ahead and run this and see what it looks. So once you run it, you should see it over here. If you don't see it, you can just refresh it and you're going to be seeing this view over here. And here's what we see. Now, one issue that I see here is that it's displaying the options as a separate record. And this is going to be a problem for us when we try to display the questions. And so a much better way to do it would be to display these multiple options as an array of strings. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it. Modify the view to display the multiple options as a list of strings. Let's go ahead and see what happens. All right, so now you see it's aggregating this text as options. It's making them an array aggregate. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and rerun it. Okay, so it's having issues, and that happens a lot when you try to modify views. And so one cool thing that you can do is you can simply come over here and you can go to SQL editor and you can simply paste this. But before that, you can drop that view. Just do this, drop view, rerun that whole thing, and that should do it. And so now if we come to our tables or views, we come over here. Now we just have this one record with the options here. And that's going to be perfect when we try to display it in the UI. And we are also displaying the other questions, right? Just like how the view, this AI told us, except there are null options because it's text. And when we see text, we're just going to ignore options. That is absolutely fine. Okay, so we have this over here. And what that means is that we can simply come back to our app, Control K, Supabase, refresh our schema. And now we're going to be seeing the options here, and we have these options. Okay, so now that we have the options and we're displaying the right questions, we can start to display them here. Okay, now before I do that, we need to make sure that we have Supabase authentication enabled. And so I'm going to press Control K. I'm going to type auth. I'm going to disable authentication. I'm going to say Supabase. And now it wants us an entry page and a logged in page. So the logged in page is going to be home. The entry page is a login page. So we need to create another page. I'm going to click over here. And for this type of page, I like to use a template. So I'm just going to use maybe this template right here. Just use my theme. And I'm going to say login, create page, and we have this. And I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to remove all this third-party login, this Google, Apple, all of this I'm going to remove. Okay, and we're going to see if we have any errors. Let it refresh. We have one error. Yeah, that's the initial error with the entry page. So I'm going to go ahead and set up our entry page. Just going to rename home page to home to make it simpler. And so now we don't have any issues. We don't have anything. And so now we can display our UI. And so when it comes to building the UI, this is where you have to be very careful, because unlike with a mobile app, that's displayed on a mobile device, right? iOS, Android, and where the device kind of deals with how it looks and all that. When you're building a web app, you need to make sure it's responsive, because the user can easily resize the screen. So I can do something like this, and that's going to change it around. Okay, so it's very, very important that you make sure that it is responsive. Okay, and that's what we're going to be focusing on right now. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to home, for a lack of a better term. And now we want to display the questions to a user. So we have our column here. What we want to do is we want to do a list, and inside the list, we're going to be displaying the questions. Okay, so how do we want to display it? Well, a standard way is to have the name of the question up on top, and then the either the text, if it's a text-only question, or a multiple choice. We're gonna have multiple kind of choice options. And so I'm gonna come over here, and then inside this list view, I'm gonna do a card just to set it apart. And on the card, you can do elevation. Just to give it a little bit extra, you can do a border radius. A card is like a container light. And then I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to put a column inside. Why a column? Because we need things in kind of this up and down, right? We need to organize things from top to bottom. And then inside the column, what we want to do is we want to display the question. So I'm going to do this. And we want to display the answers, either the text or a bunch of options. Okay. And so here what we can do is we can do it like this. There's a couple of ways of doing it, right? So for instance, I can type text, and I have this text field. And so this is going to be in the situation where we have kind of a field to display. Okay. And for this text field, you can customize it, right? So for instance, if you take a look at this panel right here, the rightmost panel, you can get it to display, you can get it to behave differently. So for instance, I like to do this outline here. And what I like to do is I am looking for max lines, right? So min lines, that is the minimum number of lines. So because this is kind of a paragraph type, right, it makes a lot more sense for this to start out with, minimum number of lines, right? So something like you can do 3, and if you do max lines 3, it's going to expand. So at least 3, maybe 4 sounds, something that you may want to do. Now, if you take a look at it right now, it doesn't look really good, right? It's kind of all over the place, right? We have this text, and it's kind of, there's some issues with the padding. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to column, and I'm going to make this padding 10, and that's going to create this nice padding. In fact, let's go ahead and make it more, 20. Okay, so something like this. We want this text field, this text over here, I want it to be a bit bigger. So I'm going to make it like 22, and I'm going to make it a little bit bolder. So maybe like medium bold. Okay, that looks a little bit better. You can also change the font if you want. All right, you can click over here and you can make it anything that you want. Okay, so something like this. You also have access to custom fonts. I think Roboto is pretty cool. Roboto is a cool font. So this is going to be the question that we have. Now, how do you want to display the question, right? So we can center it, but if it's just a couple of words, it's just going to be in the middle, and it's just not going to look good. So a much better approach would be to left justified. I think that's going to be a better approach. And so because the justification is being done on the column level, we want to make sure we make it left justified here. Okay. And so now if it's like a short question, it's still going to look good. It's going to be here. If it's a longer question, it's going to be there. Now, when it comes to the widgets that you have on your screen, it's very important to understand how they behave when they're different. So for instance, when we are looking at this right now, this is a short kind of, question. When it becomes longer, we need to make sure that it's not going to overflow. Okay. And we can control that in a number of different ways. So for instance, because we have this column, what I typically like to do is I like to wrap this in a row, because these are being displayed horizontally. And I like to make sure that this text widget inside the row has as much space as it needs. So what I like to do is I like to do this expansion here. And that gives it a constraint, because if you don't do this, it doesn't have a constraint. And what that means is that because the row doesn't have a constraint and nothing else above it has a constraint except the main kind of, the main thing, this home, this main parent widget, this is going to overflow. Okay, so if I were to do this, right, if I would have pasted this here, that will overflow. You see how it's overflowing? And as you can see, when we run our app, it overflows. And why does it overflow? Because its parent widget does not give it any constraints. It basically says do whatever you want. But this main widget, right, this scaffold, as it's called, it has a constraint because a user's device, it's not unlimited in terms of its width, right? It has a certain bound, okay? And so what we need to do here is for these widgets, if they're inside the row right here, we can do this expansion here, and that's going to wrap them. That is exactly what we want, okay? Now for this text, we can also wrap it inside of a row, and we can do this expansion. And that is kind of what I like. I want to see it expand as much as necessary. Okay, now obviously this thing over here, if it has this, that is all that's going to be displayed, right? It's just, it has this constraint, okay? And so that is kind of what we have. We have this over here. And the other thing that I want to do is I want to create a bunch of multiple choice options when this is not a free form question here. Okay. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and in fact, what I can do is I can insert, I can duplicate this, and here we're going to have something else. So these two are never going to be displayed at the same time. Okay, and so what we can do is we can delete this, and now we can display another widget, and this widget is going to be a selector widget. I forget what it's called. It's going to be this widget right here, this radio button. Okay, and so you can display it something like this, or you can display it horizontally, something like this. I prefer horizontally in this case, because I don't know, that is what I prefer. I mean, it's up to you. I guess you can do them. I guess come to think of it, you can also do them vertical if you want. In fact, why don't we just do them vertical? Okay. Why don't we just have this vertical style? That's kind of cool. And the same thing here, you want to expand it, all right? Because this is inside of a row. You want to give this expansion. And that way it's not going to have issues with overflowing. Okay. And here what we want to do is, and now we need to create this conditional stuff here, okay? So this thing, this row, we want it to be displayed only if the type is text, I believe, right? And so that's going to be displayed there, and then this is going to be displayed when it's multiple, or whatever we called it. And so next what we want to do is we want to feed the data into our list view. So I'm going to come over here. We're going to feed Supabase query, and I'm going to do question info with options, list of rows, and there's no filters. There's no ordering, at least not yet. Everything looks good. We're going to say confirm. And now we're going to feed the values, right? We're going to come over here. We're going to click here, and we're going to say question text. Once a default, so we're going to say question text, and we're going to come over here, and we're going to say initial value. There's no initial value. Okay. And now the radio button, well, we have the options, right? This is where we have the options. So we can define the options like this, and we can go into options list. And now we have our options here. Okay. And so that's going to be displayed here automatically. Now we need to have conditional visibility here. We have a couple of errors. Okay. So the reason for that is because these are accepting arguments, right? They're accepting values. And it wants us to wrap them in its own container. Okay, as you can see right here, right? This radio button will not function, and then this text field, that's actually fine. We can simply click over here, and what we can do is we can convert to component. Okay, and I'm going to call this input text component. Okay, we have that, and we come back here, and now we do the same thing here. convert to component, and this could be question. Okay, same thing. And it automatically passed all the values, right? So if you come over here, you see how it has a parameter, and this thing also, well, this thing doesn't have a parameter, and that's fine. And that is kind of what we have, right? So it has the values, it has everything. And so now what we want to do is we want to make sure that these are conditionally set. So this is only if it's a question of type text. So we're going to do conditional. We're going to come over here, and you see how we have this question type. And so I'm going to create the condition. I'm going to come over here. I'm just going to type, and I'm going to say if this is equal to text, right? And then I'm going to go ahead and, well, I want to make sure I save it, copy this, come back here. And now if this, I'm going to paste this, and this is set to multiple. And so that way it's either going to be this being displayed or this being displayed. Okay. Very, very important. Now let's go ahead and run our app and see what happens. I'm going to go ahead and reload this and see how it looks. Does it look good? Are there any issues? Okay. It looks pretty decent. Let's see. Does this look good to you? Now let's say we minimize this. Let me go ahead and remove that. And I want to make sure if it's breaking. Okay, that is our size. And if we make it smaller, it looks good. It looks pretty good. We'll do more testing in a little bit, but right now it looks pretty decent, right? It's not breaking or anything like that. It looks pretty decent. And also we need to remove this and maybe change this thing so it's a little bit more visible. So I'm going to come over here. And in fact, I need to come over here. This is our text, and this is this hint field. I'm just going to remove that. And what I want to do is, let's come back here. We have this text field, and what we can do is we can change, right? So let's see, there's a border color. Maybe we change the border color. Okay. And yeah, maybe a border color is all we need. Let's go ahead and refresh this. Okay. So that looks a little bit better. That looks a little bit better. We just need a little bit of padding here. Okay. So let's go ahead and fix the padding. Come back here, and I'm going to pad this, this row. So it has some bottom padding, maybe 10 pixels. Okay, let's go ahead and refresh this. Okay, that looks a lot better. I think this looks much better. And once it has focus, right? So right now it doesn't have focus. If you hover over, it changes a little bit. But when you click here, it now has focus. All right, so far it looks really, really good. Now, while you're building this app, it's very, very important to keep your eye on any of the performance issues that you may have. So if you click over here, you have these suggestions here. Now, typically, I don't really care. I don't really look at them for like mobile stuff as much. But when it comes to web app stuff, you need to kind of pay more attention to this. So it's telling us shrink wrapping list view can cause performance issue. Okay, so this is really, really good. And so what this means is that we have this list view here. And if you take a look at the properties pane here, it's shrink wrap, right? So if we click over here, we get an error, and that is because of constraints issues, right? So if you go to this list view, what you want to do is you want to expand it first, and then you want to turn off the shrink wrap, and now you can do it. And now you should not have this issue anymore. So if you click over here, it is gone. These profile suggestions are very, very helpful, and they're especially important when it comes to any performance issues, right? Because you want to be you want to build as performant app, if you will, as you can. You want to build an app that's fast. And that is especially important when it comes to web apps. Now, the next thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that we have our a submit button over there, okay? And so I'm going to go to a column, and I'm going to put in a row like we did before. And I'm going to put in a button, and I'm going to give it some padding here. Let's be generous. 30 is nice. And I'm going to center this button on the row level. And now it is centered, and we can go ahead and change it to, okay, submit survey or something like that, or what have you. All right. And so now what we have here is we have an app, we have some surveys, we have different things here, different types of questions, and we have the button. Okay. So let's go ahead and run our app. Let's start a new session and see how it looks like. All right, so here's the app. And as you can see, we have our questions here. This is submit. This is our button. Now, as a result of doing that, we have here a list view, a widget that's taking up max amount of space. Okay, so even if it doesn't have enough widgets, it's still taking up the space, right? That is a feature of how constraints work, okay? And so this is nice, but the only thing is that we're left with this gap over here. And so I personally don't mind because, you know, I want this thing to be at the bottom. And so we can change the color, we can do what we want. I personally think this is fine. I don't think this button should be right under. So even if we have one question, it's going to be here. I feel that it needs to be here. Okay, that is kind of how I feel. Okay, it's up to you how you want to design it. But as far as I'm concerned, this is absolutely fine. Okay. Now, the next thing that I want to do is I want to save these answers in this, in the responses table when the user clicks here. Now, one issue we have here that makes things a little bit more complex is, these are separate widgets. And so if these were not separate widgets, if these were on this page, then we can simply use widget state to save them. But because they're a separate widget, it's like another layer on top. And so what we need to do is we need to save state individually, have the state ready, and then when the user submits it, we can just save that response. And so what we need to do is we have this app state that I have created, this answers, which is a list of different answers. And so what's going to happen is as the user selects an answer, we're going to create or replace a specific answer inside the app state. Okay. And so let's say they work with these options, right? So we're going to go into options. We're going to click here and we're going to open up our trigger, and then on selected, what we're going to do is we are going to manipulate this app state to save the answer. Okay. So we're going to take these answers, and what we need to do is we need to either do insert at index or we need to do update at index. Okay. So let's say we want to test it out. I'm going to do insert at index. We have the index over here. And we have the value because that is simply this widget state. Okay, and that's it. And we don't really even need to rebuild anything. We can just leave it for this, but we don't really need to do that. Okay, and we're gonna do the same thing here. Come over here, open this up, unfocus change. So when the focus changes, we need to save the answer. We're basically saving the answers question by question. So we're going to go into state management, update app state, answers. We are going to insert at index. We have the index, we have the answer, and here's our app. And if we scroll down, we have our answers here. And so let's say I select this, and now we have item 0 excellent. And that's just for inserting. We still need to update. We're going to do that in a second, but let me test this. Let's say I type something here, I exit out, or I click somewhere else, it should update this item 1. Okay? And so now we have this, we have this. And same thing here, I do something here, and now we have the answers saved. And now when the user clicks submit, we have these answers right here in the specific order, right? We know the order, we know the questions, right? We can simply save them into the database, right? So if you come back over here, we have this responses over here, and we have this question ID, response text, and we have the user ID of the logged in user. Okay. And so we can easily insert the specific records here. Now, the next thing I need to do is I also need to make sure that we're able to update the question. And that is, right now we have this insert. And so what we can do is we can first check if there is already an answer in that specific index. If it is, we're going to update it. Otherwise, we're going to insert it. Okay, so I'm going to create a condition. I'm going to make it first. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to do a single condition. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go into my app state. And I'm going to say item and index. I'm going to select specific index. We have this index. And here we can select is set and not empty. Okay, we're going to select that. If it's set, then we're going to update it, right? Otherwise, we're going to insert it, right? So this is this inserting, insert. Otherwise, we're going to update. Okay. So now I'm going to go over here and I'm going to type state, app state, and here's where we're going to update. So I'm going to do update item at index. We have the index. We have the item, widget state, text field. Okay. And in fact, I can just copy this whole thing and I can use it here. Okay, let's go ahead and see if it works. There's our index. This is our radio button. Same thing here. Let's go ahead and restart the app. Okay, no problems, no errors. Let's go ahead and rebuild our app. All right, here we go. And so now let's say I create an answer. I basically answer it for the first time. I do excellent. And if we scroll down, we have item 1 excellent. If I change this, it changes it to great, changes it to poor here. And if I type something here, answer 2, we should have answer 2, answer 3, and we have answer 3. Now, if I change this answer 2, 2, it changes that. And I do answer 3, 3, and it should change this answer 3, 3. Okay. And I can also change this to excellent. And it knows it. And so it's maintaining state because otherwise we wouldn't know this, right? There's no way because we're dealing with components and components have their own state. And so we need app state. Okay. We can also use page state. In fact, another option is to use page state too, because it's one page. Okay. As well. And so now when we hit submit, we can clear all of this just in case. And we can save all of this because we have the IDs here, right? We know the ID of the first one, the ID of the second one, the ID of the third one, and we have all of them here. And so we can cycle through the answers and we can get the IDs, okay? In fact, something that's even better that we can do is we can create an answer type over here. So let me show you. We can do an answer type and we can have it have 2 fields, right? So the first field is the question ID and this is an integer and the second one is the answer. And so that way we have the information here. And so now what we can do is we can come back over here and we can change this. We can modify here. So we have to delete it. And this is no longer a list of strings. It's going to be a list of question types. So I'm just going to do answers, data type, answer type. This is also a list. And that way, when we save it, we have the question ID and we have the answer. It's going to be a lot easier to save all of that. And so we're going to come over here. In fact, we're going to go to our components here. We're going to open this up. We're going to select this and do the same thing. We just need to modify it. Item at index, specific index, index. It's the same thing. And here we need to change it. So we need to here, if it's set, we are going to be updating it, right? So let's come over here, select this, item at index. We have the index and we're going to update the fields. Right. So which field do we need to update? Just the answer, just the question answer. That's all we need to modify. And so that's going to be widget state because the ID is the same. The ID does not change. But when we create it, we need to give it an ID. Okay. So here's where it's not there. So we need to do an insert at index. And here's what we need to do. We need to create this object, question ID, and we need to pass question ID as well. So that's another important thing. So here I'm just going to put 100 just for testing, but we also need to pass question ID because the component needs to know the ID of the question it's dealing with. So you could properly set the app state. So here I'm just going to save it. Okay. And I want to do the same thing. This is our app state answers. This is this condition over here. We're going to select our answers. We're going to do item at index, specific. We have the index and this needs to be is set. And then the same thing here. So this is if it's set, we're going to be updating and we're going to update the answer. Otherwise, we're going to create this whole thing. We're going to do insert at index. We're going to create this and I'm just going to put 100. See if that's just for testing. Let's go ahead and let it refresh. No project issues. Let's go ahead and refresh this. All right. So there's our app state. So if I do this excellent, you see now it saves this question ID, which is just a random one. If I do that 100, it has this 100. Oh. If I exit out, now it saves it another one. There's 100 and 111. And if I do that and I exit out 333. So we just need to pass the question ID and that's going to make it super easy to save the responses for the question ID. Super easy. Okay, let's go back and let's pass the question ID. So I'm going to select this component. I'm going to add another one. This is an integer and I'm going to do the same thing here. Required. Okay. And now let's come back over here. And now we need to pass it. And that's easy. We should have the question ID. There's the question ID. and there's the question ID. And that should save it correctly. And so now let's go ahead and pass those correctly when we create it actually, because we have the question ID now. Done here, and come back over here, do that. And now we can refresh. All right. And so now if we do excellent here, to scroll down, we have this question ID 1, do that, question ID 2, question ID 3. And if I change something here, exit out, it's going to be it's the same question ID. So now we have the answers, the question IDs, which means that we can save all of this correctly. So if we come over here, we can execute a save. The only thing is, if you take a look at this table, you can see that we have question ID, the question, the answer, question, answer. These are separate records. And so what this means is that we need to loop over the app state and create our records. So we're going to come over here, select the button, open this up, and we're going to create a loop. So I'm going to add a loop, and what we're going to do is we're going to loop over the app state. And so this is our condition. How far is the loop going to go? And so what we need to do is we need a variable that's going to track if we have done all the repetitions. And this is a perfect situation, a perfect use case for a page variable. Okay? Because we're clicking this button and it's a page thing. Okay? So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to create the variable and I'm going to just call it loop index. And I'm going to make it an integer, and I am not going to make it nullable. I want to make sure it's initialized at 0. Very, very important. And so now if you go over here, open this up, we can have a condition. And the condition is a single condition. And we can say, continue while the loop index is less than the number of items in the array. So I'm going to do less than, and then number of items in the array. We have our app state, answers, I'm going to do number of items. Okay, this is kind of how you want to do it. Because it's going to start from 0, it's going to go until it's going to keep going while it's less, right? Because when it becomes equal to, we need to exit out, okay? And here's where we're going to do our Supabase query, right? Supabase insert. Insert, and we're going to do responses. And now you can put all of this, delete these, question ID. We have the question IDs, app state, answers, item at index. And this is going to be, and now we need data structure field, question ID. Now there's lots of things happening, so I like to copy it and I like to paste it here, and I'm going to select question answer and user ID. User ID is the auth user ID. All right. Now, one important thing that you need to do, you need to increment this loop index, because if you do not, it's just going to be a infinite loop. So you want to increment it, and you're going to select your page state, and it's really easy to increment loop index, and you just want to increment 1. When it's 1, it's by 1. If it's -1, you're going to be decrementing it. Okay? And you don't really need to rebuild or anything like that. It's not important. Okay, and so when you hit save, it's gonna save it. And then what you can do is you can also do something like a snack bar that said saved successfully. Survey saved successfully. Okay, something like this, whatever. Hide previous snack bar. And that's it. Now let's go ahead and test this out. Start a new session. All right, here we are. So this is the moment of truth. We do excellent, and let's keep tracking on our app state. This is good. Yes, I would. I exit, I go to the second one. It's saved, right? Excellent. And I say, make it faster. Okay. I exit out and I hit submit. Service, saved successfully. Come back over here, and there it is. Question ID, excellent. Okay. And we have the user ID. All right. So we have this working right here. And the next thing that I want to do is I want to build out the admin part, okay? And so we're going to come over here and we're going to add a new page, okay? This is going to be the blank page, and I'm just going to say admin view. And on this admin page, what I want to do is I want to display the submitted surveys in a grid format. And I want to show you the grid format so that you can see how to make it reactive, because we're building a web app. Okay, so I'm going to come over here. I'm going to add a grid view. And inside the grid view, I'm going to show some information about the submitted items. Okay. And I mean, here on this grid view, you want to decide how many items you want to display horizontally. And I have here 3. We can make it less, but because this is a web app, we have a lot of real estate to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and add a cart. And so here we can display some of the things that were submitted. And so what I propose is we can have a column and we can have, let's say, a row, and we can have a text. And so this could be maybe the user answers to their questions and the date it was submitted. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate all this. I'm going to space this out, maybe something like this. And I'm going to display some information. Okay, let's give it some padding. Let's do padding on this column level. Okay, and we can also do a little padding here. Elevation. Okay, so that looks kind of cool. We can obviously increase the text as well. We'll do that in a second. And yeah, now we just need to display the data. Okay, now if we take a look at our database over here, these are the responses. Okay, and so we can filter, we can group it by the user, and we can display everything. And what I would recommend is we create a view that gives us the responses in kind of this maybe as an array. Okay, so it's going to be an array of just in the single field, and that way we can just get the entire record and we can list it. It's going to be a lot easier. Okay, so let's go ahead and say create an admin view that will display each user response as its own record, displaying the responses to questions as a list of strings. Also display the user email. I think that's the only thing we have. We don't have like username or anything like that. So just display the user email and create it at created at as the date, as the time, the response. Okay, let's see how it looks. Okay, so it's writing SQL right now. And so, yeah, so it's correct because it's aggregating these ones into one field. All right, and it's also aggregating these ones into one field. This doesn't need to be aggregated because it's just the same users. And in order to kind of capture everything that this user submitted, we need to aggregate this and we need to aggregate this. We're not really worried about this too much, at least right now. And so that is what we get. I'm going to go ahead and run it. And now if we come back over here, we go ahead and refresh that. We have this admin responses view. Okay. And, unfortunately, it did not aggregate it correctly because it needs to group them. Yeah, it needs to group them just by the user. Okay. Change the view so that we are grouping just by the user ID. Okay, because here it's grouping by a bunch of fields, and these fields are all different, the values, and so we need to group it just by the user ID. And yeah, this is fine. Okay, and so let's see if this works. Yeah, it doesn't work because we're modifying fields. So I'm gonna go ahead and edit in SQL Editor, and I'm gonna delete the old view, the existing view, and I'm gonna run that, and that should do it. And now if you come back over here, let's go ahead and refresh it. And this is what we get now. Okay, so now it's properly grouped. It's grouping by these two fields, which are gonna be the same for the records. And this is what we are getting. So we're getting the responses. We're also getting the questions, which is kind of cool as well, if you want to list the questions. And we also have the latest response time. So we have everything that we need. We're gonna go back here, Supabase. We're gonna refresh our schema. And that is what we have. And so now we can list them here. So I'm going to feed them on the grid view, and I'm going to do a Supabase query, admin user responses. And we don't really need to filter, right? Because we're going to get all the responses. We can order by the latest response time, and we want it to be increasing order. Okay. So that it's older, and it becomes increasing, or we can do it in decreasing. It's up to you. This looks good to me. I'm going to confirm that. And now I can list the fields. And so what do I want to list? Well, I'm going to list a user. I'm going to list the email. I'm going to list the time, and then I'm going to list the questions. So here I'm going to do combine. And here I'm going to do user email. I'm going to say space at, and I'm going to list the time, latest response time. And I like to format it. I'm going to do it relative, maybe relative. I like relative. Relative is cool. And here we can list the responses. And in fact, what we want to do is we don't want to list them like this, right? Because there could be, 3 responses, 3 questions, 3 responses, or 5. or 10. We want to do them dynamically. And so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to delete this. Or in fact, what I can do is I can wrap these. I can wrap this widget in a list view. Okay, and I'm going to delete this. And I'm going to delete this. And then I'm going to feed this list view a generating children from a variable. And you use this when you have data. So I'm going to do responses here. And then I'm going to say response item. And then I can simply list the responses. And I want to do a little bit of padding. Let's do padding. Let's do padding at the row level. Okay. And so those are going to be the responses. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to list the response. Okay. And these are going to be the responses here. Now, you also want to make sure that this text does not overlap. It does not kind of run until the end, right? And so what you want to do is you want to give it as much space as it has inside of this row. Now for the list view, we are going to have an issue because it's telling us this shrink wrapping, right? So we don't want to have shrink wrapping. And if we don't want to have shrink wrapping, we want to give it as much space as possible. This also has space, right? And so that is fine. Another thing that we can do is we can do something like this as well. But I think this is going to be the best. And then we can turn off shrink wrapping here. And here we can do padding as well. We can make it even bigger. I'm going to do bigger here, 16. Oops. Yeah, 16 looks good. And I'm going to give it a little bit of bottom padding, something like this. Okay, so now this has a lot of space. We're also going to make sure that it is scrollable as well. And that should do it. That should display. So I'm going to call this survey submissions. Okay. So we have our survey submissions. And another interesting thing that we can do here, when the user logs in, they see this page. So right now they can't really get to this admin view. I'm just going to call it admin view. And we don't really want to have this as part of the navbar because it's going to be available for everybody. And so what we can do is we can redirect the user when they log in automatically to this admin view if we discover that the user is an admin. Okay? So a little bit of a trick there. Okay? And how do we do that? Well, when an admin logs in, we can have a redirection here, right? So how do we do that? Well, we just create an action. We just create a custom action that's going to navigate them, right? So we can open this up and here we can do a check that checks if the user is an admin or not and then redirect them, right? So I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to do that in a second. But first, I want to check that the admin shows up. And for that, I'm going to change a couple of things. I'm going to come here. In fact, I'm going to go to details and I'm going to temporarily set this to redirect the admin view so that we at least test if the admin view works as expected. So let's go ahead and start a new session and see how this looks. All right, I'm going to go ahead and log in. And there we go. Now we see the one of the responses here. Now, looking at it, I realized that obviously we need more information here, but that's fine. I realized that we want to list the questions as well. So let me go ahead and change that. I'm going to go to this admin view. And what we can do is in this list view, we can display the question as well. So we have this row. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this in a column. Okay. And that way I can duplicate the row. Okay. And so now we have a column and we have 2 rows per item, right? So it's going to be, this list view is going to be iterating this column. And so we can have question and answer. And so this means that we need to make sure that we're feeding the right data. Okay. So we're feeding responses. And this is, in fact, what we can do is we can change that. We can feed questions. And let me show you how we can do it. So now this is a question item and we can display the question. This is the question. And here is what we can do is we can say, well, we want to display the responses. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to say item at index and we're going to say specific index and we're going to say this thing, index and list, right? Because we know the index and taking that index, we can display any array that we want. So we're going to do that. Let's give it a default value response. Okay. And so question, response, question, response. The only thing I want to change is I want to change the padding. I'm going to remove the padding. I'm going to remove the padding, and I'm going to do it a little bit differently. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the one padding on the column level. I'm going to do bottom maybe 20, something like this. And then I'm going to have a little bit of a padding on this row level. So I'm going to do, okay, so something like this. So it's kind of spaced out. And we want to make sure that this text is expanded. This is expanded because we've duplicated, and now it looks good. Now let's go ahead and test this out. And there we go. Question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. The only thing I'd like to do is I'd like to format them differently. So I'm going to go to this one. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, 16, and I'm going to make it a little bit bolder, maybe semi-bold. Okay, that looks good. And this one, we're going to leave it as is, 14. Maybe a little bit less padding, maybe 5. Let's go ahead and see. Let's go ahead and see how it looks. All right, so that looks a lot better. Or maybe that's too bold. Let's go ahead and change that. That's probably too much. That's no problem. What do we have? Semi-bold, we can do medium. Obviously, that's a design choice, but I felt like they need to kind of stand out. Okay, that looks better. I think that's perfect. And you can change this in some way. You can kind of have that standing out. So maybe this text, let's see, we can wrap it in a container maybe. Okay, and this container, you don't want to give it width and height. You want it to kind of be flexible, and you can kind of change you can give it a box shadow. No, we don't want. You can give it a fill color. You can give it a border color. Let's give it a fill color, maybe kind of this. Let's give it a border color. Do we want to give it a border color? Let's give it a border color, something like this. Let's go ahead and pad it. Next, you want to pad it on this level, on the text level, so that it expands, something like this. And that kind of looks good. You can also give it a border radius. I think 8 is the right one. So something like this, you know. So I realized that we might want to give this container an expansion. Okay, because we no longer could do it on the text level, we want to do it on the container level. Okay, so that way container has as much space as it needs. So that's kind of cool. A little thing there, a little widget that kind of stands out. All right, that looks a lot better. You got to admit, that looks much better. Let me know in the comments below if you are a UI, UX designer, how would you make this better, right? Because I'm always learning about UI, UX design, okay? But I think that looks kind of cool. This card, this stands out. This is rounded corner. This stands out. And obviously you would not have it in email. You might want to display name, maybe some other information, but you know, you can just create another table, link it one-to-one to that original users table, and just pull any of the fields that you want. So this looks kind of cool. Now, the next thing that I want to work on is redirecting the admins to this screen while having regular users be redirected here. And the way that we're going to do it is we're going to set up this home screen as default in terms of the app wide. But when we log in, we are going to redirect the user, okay, elsewhere, okay? And in order to do that, we need a table or a view that tells us that allows us to specify a user ID and get the role. Now, we don't want to just get the role ID. We actually want to get the name of the role. And we have this user roles, but unfortunately it has this role ID. And so what I need to do is I need to create a special view that displays a user ID and the name of the role. Okay. So I'm going to do that right now. Create a view that displays all the fields in user roles, but shows us and also shows us the name of the role as well. All right, there we go. So it does a join with the roles table because that has the name of the roles. Let's go ahead and run it and see if it gives us what we need. Okay, that went ahead and executed. Go ahead and refresh it. And here we have it. Okay, and so now we have the name of the role, which is going to be very, very helpful. We also have role assigned that. We don't really need this, but why not? It's not going to hurt. And what I want to do is I want to sort by entity type so that I can see all my views at the bottom here. All right, let's go back to Supabase, to FlutterFlow, and let's go ahead and refresh our schema. We have this new table here, this new view, that is there. And so now what we can do is we can redirect the user when they log in. And we do that by having a check at the top level of this default view. So let me double check that we have this as the default view. Okay, so now it's the default view. So we do not show admin view to users, even for a split second. Okay, so we have this here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create an action on page load. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a query, a Supabase query, where we're going to get the name of the role that the logged in user is in. So I'm going to say, and what we want to do is this user with names. I'm going to do a filter. And what we want to do is we want to filter by user ID is equal to authenticated user. Okay, and that's pretty much it. And now we're going to get that one record. And now we need to look up the role. So I'm going to create a condition here. And I'm going to say single condition. I'm going to say, well, first we need to return the data. So I'm going to say user roles output. Okay. We're going to come here. We're going to say single condition. We're going to do this and we're going to go to action output. We're going to come over here. And here is where we just got to get the first item, right? So we're going to say first, because there should be only one. And we are going to say get role field. And what I want to get is the role name. So if the role name is equal to admin, we want to redirect them somewhere else. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do navigate to admin view. Okay. Otherwise, we're going to navigate them to the home view. Or in fact, otherwise we don't need to do anything, right? Because by default, it's that the main view. Okay. So we have this check here. We are getting, we have our filter that should give us just one row. Okay, we have this over here. We're filtering and then we see if the role is admin, we're going to redirect to admin view. Okay, let's go ahead and see if this works. Start a new session. All right, and there's the app. Now, if I refresh it, you probably would have seen a redirect right there. Okay, so it loads this and then it redirects. Now, it depends, you know, do you like this behavior or do you not like this behavior? Personally, I'm not a big fan of this behavior. Okay, it's kind of, you know, it shows that there, it loads that first. What we can do to fix it is we can create another page, kind of a loading page. Okay, so I'm going to create a blank page and I'm going to say loading. And here we can display please wait loading or something like that. So I'm going to create a card and I'm going to put some text. And what I want to do is I want to center this and I'm going to wrap it in a row so we can center that as well. And I am going to do a couple of interesting things. So I'm going to go ahead and add some padding here, and I'm going to add some padding here, and I'm going to add some padding here. What we can do now is, in fact, what I can do is I can also wrap this in a container and I can add more padding, something like this. And I can make this card, give it a little bit of elevation, and I can make this container a little bit interesting. Let's give it a border radius of 8. Let's give it a fill color, kind of grayish, something like this. This primary background is nice. And I am going to give it a border width of 1. And here I can put what I need to put. I can make this also a little bit bigger. I can make this a lot bigger. I'm going to do semi-bold or maybe medium. Up to you. Let's go ahead and make this a little bit more. Something like this. Okay, and here we can say something like loading, please wait. Something like this. Okay, so we have this loading. This is like a splash page. Loading. And let me know what you guys think of this UI. Okay, maybe this should be two rows. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this in a column, and I'm gonna wrap this in a row. And I'm going to duplicate this. Yeah, this row there, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this. And now we can have something like loading. I'm going to make it bigger. And there's a lot of padding on this row level. So we're going to decrease that. Even on this text, we don't need that much padding anymore. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. Okay, and I can say, please wait. Let's make this bigger. Let's make this column. Yeah, I don't know. Something like that. And let's make this also bigger. This is 36. I'll make that 32. Okay. So something like this. So this is going to be our loading page, and we're going to make this the default page, and that page will determine where the user goes, which I think is a better approach. So I'm going to go back to this home. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to copy this action. In fact, yeah, I'm going to copy it and I'm going to go to loading and I'm going to use this action here. And so now it's going to check here, but now we also need the other condition. Copy, paste, and we want to redirect to home. Right? So if it's not an admin, if it's an admin, go to admin view, otherwise go to home. And I'm going to remove it here from home. We don't need that. Something isn't properly set. What is improperly this thing here? Action outputs. I'm going to do first equal to admin. Oh, I forgot this. Get row field. We're going to click here and I'm going to put admin. So now let's go ahead and see how it works. See what's happening. There we go. Now it loads and redirects here. Okay. So that's one thing that we can do. Something else that we can also do is change the redirection. Okay. This navigation. So there's a default. We can do instant and see if that gives us kind of a better user experience there. All right. So it loads. And then it disappears. So I think that's better. That's better because the other types, this default navigation style, it's better when you're navigating from like a list to a detail view. So this is a lot better. All right. And that looks pretty good. One thing that I want to do is I want to have the ability to log out. Okay. Because, you know, if you're logged in, maybe you want to log out as an admin or you want to log in as an admin. And so what I'm going to do is on this text here, I'm going to just show them that they're logged in as this person. And they can log out. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this widget in a row. And then I'm going to add another text widget here. And we can also do something like this. And this part is going to display who the user is logged in. So I'm going to do combine and I'm going to display the auth user email. And so if they click on this, right, they're going to log out. Okay, let me go ahead and put a little space. Okay, that's gonna have the email, and if they want, they can click on it and log out. And if they do that, we're gonna do a log out, Supabase log out, and that is what we have. Okay, and I'm gonna do the same thing on the admin page. Okay, in case you want to log in as another person for whatever reason. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this in a row, and I'm gonna go ahead and duplicate this. I'm gonna make this like this, and the same thing is what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna come back home. And I'm gonna paste this over here. Let's do in the column. And I'm gonna do the same thing here. I'm going to say, I'm gonna do a combine. This is auth user, email, add space. I'm gonna say log out. And if they click on this, they're gonna log out. All right, let's go ahead and refresh our app. All right, so here I am logged in. I can click here and that's gonna log me out. And I can log back in as a regular user. And now it's displaying the survey and I can log out and log back in as James if I want. Now the app is starting to look good, but the next thing that I want to do before we actually deploy it is we want to make sure that it works on a real device. And before we download this app, the first thing that we need to do is we need to enable this web functionality. And so I'm going to come over here. I'm going to search for platforms web. And I'm going to go ahead and enable this web. Now here you have something called advanced web settings. And so if you expand that, you can select this over here. And you typically select this if you have any issues, right? If check your app will be built using Flutter's Canvas Kit web browser. This is currently in beta. Okay, so we're going to leave this off. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here and I'm going to select this option to open this in VS Code. Okay, you can also download the code here. Or you can also use this option, but this option only works if you're using the desktop app, okay? And so I prefer this option right here. I can simply click here. That's going to go ahead and open it up and it's going to download it. And I'm going to say no here. And I'm going to wait for all of this to finish. And looks like all of this has been finished. And so now I have this app downloaded on my local machine. And if I click over here, I can run it in various devices on various platforms. And so because we're building a web app, I'm going to select Chrome over here. I'm going to go into run without debugging. And that's going to go ahead and launch our web app in Chrome here. All right, so now it's running our app in a real browser. This is a Chrome browser. And so it's telling me to create an account. I'm going to go ahead and log in and I'm logged in. And these are the survey submissions here. This is kind of what it looks like. I can log out. And one thing that I'm looking at is I'm looking if it looks good. I'm looking for any issues. Okay. So if I do this, I expand it, that expands it. It does something like this. And now we have slight overflow. But that's fine, right? Because what are the chances that somebody's going to be viewing it like this, right? I'm just looking at like this, right? And as you can see, as we get bigger, this expands. Because that's how grid views work, right? Grid views take up space, right? We have a 3 three items here, right? 3 items per row. And so if you make it bigger, it's going to automatically take up space. Okay, so it looks good. It looks good. There's no overflow in this view. Looks good. And now I'm going to log out and I'm going to log in as a regular user. I'm going to click here. I'm going to go into login and I'm going to log in as Rob and see how the main app looks. Okay, and so this is how it looks. And look, it looks pretty nice, right? So I can expand it. I can do this and you see how it wraps and it stops. It stops right here. And so it looks pretty good to me. Right, this expands, this expands. I can go ahead and fill this out. So how would you recommend? Absolutely awesome app. Do you have any feature suggestions for this app? No, I do not. It works as expected. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and submit the survey. And it says survey saved successfully. And if we go back here and we go into responses, we should see new responses for a different user. Okay, looks good to me. And now what we can do is I can go back and I can log out and I can log in as the admin again. And I can see the survey submissions. And so we are seeing the survey submissions. And so we can expand it. We can kind of work with it and we see it's wrapping, which is exactly what we want. So it looks really good. Now, if you want to make some changes in this app, let's say you want to change the message when the user submits. Let's say you want to make some changes. Let's say I'm making a change right here and I want to change this success. Okay, nice and simple. What you're going to do is you're going to go back into Visual Studio Code and you can pull in the latest changes. So I'm going to pull in the latest changes and that should have that change that I made, right? This is why this is so powerful. Okay. So successfully pulled. And now what I can do is I can restart my app using this feature here, this hot restart. And now if I go back into Chrome and I log out and I create another survey, okay, so I go ahead and create another survey and I log in as a regular user, okay, and let's say I delete the other survey results of this user, go ahead and delete this, and we go ahead and resubmit it. So let's say I don't like it, it's very slow, I do not recommend. And now if I submit it, it's going to say success. That was the change that we made. And so this makes it super easy to push the FlutterFlow, pull the latest. Really, really nice. I really, really like that new feature. And so now that I've looked at my app and I've tested it kind of this real world environment with Chrome and things like that, and everything is fine, there are no issues, I am ready to launch this app. And what's nice about building apps with Flutter and FlutterFlow is that these web apps, you can host them anywhere and you can host them for basically free, right? It's going to cost you 0 to maybe a cent or 2, depending on if the app gets any traffic. But if you get a lot of traffic, it's going to be super, super affordable. Okay. So if it's not getting traffic, it's going to cost you 0 to host it initially. But if it starts getting traffic, you're going to be paying just a very, very small amount. Okay, so how exactly does this work? Well, there are lots of places that you can host it at. Lots and lots of services, lots of places. But the place that I prefer, the service that I prefer is Amazon S3. And so what we are going to do is we're going to go ahead and log into Amazon S3 by going to aws.amazon.com. Okay. And I already have an AWS account. This is Amazon Web Services. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. All right. And here I am logged into my Amazon account. And what we want to do is we want to click on S3. And here what you want to do is you want to create a new bucket. So we're going to click here and we're just going to say general purpose. And you want to give this bucket a name. So I'm just going to call it survey app. And here what you want to do is you want to make sure you deselect that so that you can see it. We're going to acknowledge that, right? And if you scroll down, you want to go ahead and click on create bucket. So it's telling us that this name already exists. I'm just going to put something like this. It needs to be unique. And here we are inside this bucket. Next thing you want to do is you want to come back to Visual Studio Code and you want to type Flutter build web. Okay. When you do that, it's going to build a web version of your app. Okay, so now it's building it for the web. And so it finished building it. And now if you go into build web, which is what it's telling us, right? This directory over here, that's going to be where your whole app is going to reside. And so what you want to do is you want to copy all of this, the inside of this web directory. So here's my app. I'm going to go into build. I'm going to go into web, and this is my app right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and copy it. I'm going to select all this, and I can simply drag it here. And you can just say upload. Okay, now it's going to be uploading. So we're going to wait a couple of minutes for it to finish. Okay, upload succeeded. And now we have everything in our bucket. I'm going to go ahead and close this. And now we have all of this information here. Now, the next thing you want to do is you want to go into properties. And if you scroll down, you have something called S3 static website hosting. You want to go ahead and enable that. Okay. And now it's telling us the index document. This is this index.html. We want to, and here we're enabling static website hosting. We're going to host a static website, which is what it is, index.html. And we're going to save changes. Next, I'm going to go into permissions here and make sure that this is off because we don't want to be blocking public access. We want public access to access it, but we need to create a bucket policy. I'm going to click edit. And here you can paste the policy that I have created. This is a public read get object. And we're going to put the bucket name. Our bucket name is Survey App 2025. I'm going to go ahead and save changes. And this should allow me to view the site. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to select index. I'm going to copy the URL and I'm going to run the app. Okay. And now our app should be loading right here. Okay. And there's our app. Okay. I can log in. Let's go ahead and see if login works. And there's the app. It's now running on a publicly available URL. Okay, and so now this URL here, it has a domain that's specified by Amazon. You can host it on your own domain as well. You can also point it to your own domain very, very easily. And for that, you can simply learn how to connect an Amazon bucket to a custom domain. It's not very complicated. I've done it many, many times before. Now we're almost done, but there's still something very, very important that we need to do, and that is our RLS policies. Okay, remember with a web app, that key is available for everybody, and because we have these open RLS policies, everybody can come in and modify the data. And so let's go ahead and work through this one by one table at a time, and try to fix our RLS policies. The first one I want to do is this questions one, and here's I'm gonna change the policies, all the open policies, to a select only policy. Okay, so meaning that you can read, but you won't be able to modify. And the idea is we'll be modifying them via this Supabase backend, which uses a different key to do it. And what we're going to do is we're going to create another policy that only allows select to everybody. So I'm going to say select, okay, and I'm going to say true to this. And that's it. I'm going to save this policy and I'm going to remove the other policy. Okay, so now we have the select policy here. Okay, next we have these question options, and we're going to do the same thing here. Okay, we're going to do select. I'm going to do select. I'm going to say true. I'll save this policy. And I'm going to delete this all policy. Now for responses, we are going to be doing something a little bit differently, right? We need an insert policy that's only for authenticated users. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and create a new policy. This is going to be insert. So insert only. Okay, so this is only for auth users. And here we need a check. Okay, we're going to have this check only auth users. So you need to log in to, modify this table. I'm going to go ahead and save it. And we also need to create a separate select policy. And so we're going to go ahead and delete this all. Okay. And we want to make sure that users can only view their own responses, but admins can view all responses. Okay. So we're going to create a new policy. We're going to do this select. And what we're going to do is we're going to paste this check here, and this check is going to allow us to make sure that admins can view, or any admin can view the responses, or the user itself can view its own responses, the one who left these. Okay, so select is going to be user or admin. Okay, so we have that. Now for the user roles, we also want to create a policy for inserts. We'll paste that there. And so this is an insert policy for admins. Only admins can do inserts, and we can remove this policy. And for roles, we are going to be allowing either admins to view roles or an existing user to check their own role. Okay, we're going to do that. This is select user ID or admins. And I'm going to provide this check here. Okay, that checks if it's an existing user or an admin. Okay, and we're going to do the same for user roles. I'm going to create a policy select, paste that there, and this is select So this is auth user or admins. Okay, there we have it. So let's double check. Questions is select for everybody, okay? Questions, we have select, questions, options, select. Responses, inserts, auth only. So authenticated users only, select user or admins. This is, we need to delete all. And so now we have select user ID or admins, insert admins, select user ID or admins. Okay, so there's no more of that all wide open kind of thing. So let's go ahead and see if our app still works. We can go ahead and create a new session. All right, let's go ahead and log in as an admin. Okay, and as you can see, because I'm an admin, I can see all the responses. And a user will be able to see their own response. And so if we log out as a user, well, we're going to get redirected to a different page. So, but they should still be able to see their own response. Let me log in as a regular user. Okay, I see the questions here, right? So I can leave questions. And if I hit submit, it submits our response here. And if I go back here, I have it in the responses. If I refresh this, I see the new responses right here. And so that is how you build a functioning web app with FlutterFlow from beginning to end. Now, if you guys enjoyed this video and you want to see things as they were happening right behind the scenes, how I built this app, everything, including getting access to this app as well, you will be able to do so by joining our amazing Patreon community. Because when you become a member, you'll have access to not only this app, but all the apps before this, as well as all the apps that come after it. And so if you're serious about building web apps or pretty much any other kind of app with no code and FlutterFlow, then you're going to gain a ton of value. Then it's definitely something that you should consider. And you can become that member via the first link in the description below the video.